Well, let's start. As any parent will testify, going for a scan when expecting a baby can be quite an experience. For most, it's a joyous moment, the first sight of what a much-wanted pregnancy looks like via a grainy ultrasound image. Of course, for others, it can be a tense time and worse. Scans sometimes reveal unexpected fetal abnormalities. But whatever the reaction, joy or despair, everyone agrees that it's a significant moment for a couple, and one that, as well as obviously requiring the presence of the mother, also benefits from the involvement of her partner. However, according to reports, several health trusts in England have imposed a bedside ban on partners because of the threat posed by Omicron. That's prompted several MPs to demand that NHS England restores the right, if that's what it is, of partners to be there when scans happen. Joining me is now Alicia Kearns, Conservative MP for Rutland. Thanks so much for your time. Do appreciate it. I use the word right in my introduction there to describe the presence of a partner for a scan. Is it really a right?
Well, there's two ways of looking at it. So first of all, there is the fundamental right to family life, under which you could argue this is protected. But actually, it's more than a right. This is a safety issue. So they have proven that when partners were taken away from women in labour during the pandemic, we saw an increase in trauma. We saw an increase in stillbirths. We saw an increase in the deaths of mothers, which was contributed to by the lack of partners. When I gave birth to my first child, it is only because my husband saw that my son's heart rate had halved and pushed the emergency button that my son is alive today. So this isn't just a rights issue, it's also a safety issue.
Talking here, however, about being there at the bedside in the maternity unit at the point of birth, or are we, as I think we are talking about, at the more diagnostic stage when the scan's being done, where, you know, you've got the mother, the expectant mother, you've got the clinician doing the scanning, and you've got the partner looking on, unlikely to offer anything of great value?
So we've got actually every single stage currently being threatened by these arbitrary and uncritical and unscientific restrictions. So we had Sandwell and West Birmingham NHS Trust who announced on one day that partners couldn't come for scans, all stages of labour until the woman was in active labour, or for appointments. But then when I kicked up a fuss, all of a sudden the next day, partners could come to all of those, but couldn't come to inpatient wards. So that, I think, shows you that we really are looking at a pandemic of arbitrary discrimination when a trust can change their policy from one day to the next. At the Princess Alexandra Trust in Harlow, we saw them saying that partners couldn't come to the fetal assessment unit. Now, you only go to a fetal assessment unit when your baby, they think you've miscarried or you're bleeding heavily or something is very seriously wrong. And I think it's really important that we don't glamorise pregnancy and birth, because in the movies, it's this really swift, magical, crazy, everyone screams and everything's okay again. But actually, there are so many people, myself included, who go for scans who find out that there's something wrong with the baby or the worst possible thing has happened. And partners matter. And also, parents deserve to be there. You know, we talk about the importance of family. We talk about the fact that we don't want family breakdown and that partners play equal roles in parenting. That starts from the moment the baby is created, not just once the baby is born.
However, I mean, trusts aren't doing this by to be antisocial. There's a rationale behind it, and that is that they want to reduce the footfall into their hospitals. We've got an NHS trust, for instance, in Lincolnshire, with a critical incident such as their level of staff shortages there. You can understand that, yes, it's pretty arbitrary, but they are trying to reduce the numbers of people who are coming into hospital for whom acute care is not necessary, and that would certainly apply in this instance, at least when we're talking about scans, just to make sure you're not having people coming into the hospital setting who may be bearing Omicron.
So there are two things I'd say there, which is in the first ever lockdown, there was one hospital in London who never at any point stopped partners coming in and yet didn't have a single case of COVID in the entirety of that lockdown. And secondly, families, parents, they're one bubble, they're one household, and they should be treated as such. We have the vaccine. The vast majority of NHS staff, and all by March, will have been double vaccinated and well as boosted, hopefully. And also we have tests. So there is no reason, particularly for things like scans and I guess what you might call the lesser degree of interventions needed, for people not to be relying on testing rather than just arbitrarily saying, well, that's it. No partners, that's it. So I think the difficulty is, as I've said, if you had NHS England saying we've got to change the guidance, it isn't safe, or if you had the Royal College of Midwives or the Royal College of pretty much any professional clinician saying that this needs to happen, then perhaps we could look at that. But at the moment, we've got NHS Trust randomly deciding to stop people, again, with no clear evidence, based on the fact that, for example, when I had a go at them on social media, they suddenly changed their minds. And there's no accountability. And that's what I'm saying to NHS England today. We need accountability. You need to monitor. You need to make sure the right mechanisms are in place. And you need to make sure that guidance is followed.
On the point about accountability, do you worry? I mean, it's felt like there's been a couple of stories, maybe more, in the last few weeks where the democratic oversight that our elected representatives have over unelected officials working within the NHS hasn't always seemed to be what it should be. Is that a fair assessment?
I agree entirely. I should never have had to launch this campaign during the pandemic. I should never have had to have this fight. And the reason I had to have this fight is because we didn't have the powers as parliamentarians to force NHS Trust to uphold NHS England guidance. Why doesn't NHS England have that? Now, one of the new bills that's coming through Parliament, the Health and Social Care Bill, actually gives more power to the Department for Health to be able to tackle things like this. But for example, in Wales, you have people on end-of-life wards allow visitors once a week for 1 hour. How is that humane? And also, how is that scientific? We need to grip this. We cannot have bureaucrats in trust deciding that women should be isolated when we know it makes them less safe. It is unscientific, it goes against the medical evidence, and it makes women less safe, as we have proof of from the last few years.
Since they're not here, just to put their side of the argument, I suspect their side of the argument would be, look, you can't run when you need to make quick decisions, decisive decisions. You can't run these things by committee. Democracy is wonderful. It just happens to take quite a lot of time to organise.
And that's why all I'm asking them to do is uphold NHS England guidance. That's all we're asking for.